one and all, and welcome to the Media Beat, episode 94. Sorry, I might have lost my voice a little bit. Had a rather large birthday over the weekend, but I now feel that I'm in my
happy birthday.
Can you believe I'm now in an age with a 6 in front of it? Yeah. Someone said to me at work, "How old are you?" I said 60, and this is a Gen Z person. He went, "Oh, aren't you doing well?" Which was the first time I've been patronised by a Gen Z. But I thought it was quite sweet. Aren't you?
Probably not the last.
No, it's all downhill. But I'm still dressing myself. Anyway, enough about that. It was fun. We have a show. So we're going to be talking BBC and Meta. Things not going well there for some people. Iqiyi, otherwise known as the Netflix of China. We'll talk about Paramount, WBD, of course. Zaslav, friend of the show, P&G and microdramas, takeover of Grasset, loads of things, and surprise.
Grasset.
Yes. Well, there's no exit. There's no accent on it.
No.
Grasset. God, what a numbskull. What an English numbskull. I'm doing very well.
You did so well on the Chinese name, and then you started.
Yeah, IGC and Grasset.
Yeah.
Grasset.
Next time we're out for wine, you can say Montrachet as well. Next time.
Yeah, Montrachet. Yeah, okay. I don't know what any of those words mean. But we will find out later. But we must move on because we have now. This is something that we talked about so many times on the Media Week, probably every episode. Netflix, and we had this slight disagreement about whether we'd ever done a deep dive because we talked about Netflix so much. Anyway, we went through the records. We haven't done a deep dive on Netflix, so we have to do a deep dive on Netflix. And to lead it, we have our very own Maureen Kerr. So Maureen, take us through from, predominantly a business angle, but and maybe Claire will lead a bit more on the creative later. But the story of Netflix.
Yes, I think I was asked to do this, or I volunteered because I was the one who said, "Of course, we've covered a deep dive on Netflix."
Oh, you started it.
I did start it. So anyway, here we go. This is Maureen's edition of the infamous deep dive that is the Media Beat. All right. So we all know that Netflix is often described as the winner of streaming, but that is only partly right, because Netflix has never really stayed in one business long enough to be defined by it, in my opinion. And I'll ask Claire whether or not she agrees with that. But anyway, roughly every 5 to 7 years, the company has changed what kind of business it is in. DVD by post became streaming. Streaming became original content. Original content became global subscriptions at scale. And subscriptions became, guess what? Advertising and paid sharing. And now Netflix may be changing again. This is the big question. From a retention business into a yield business. So the history is useful. Okay, that context I think is useful, especially now because Netflix's biggest pivots tend to look obvious only in hindsight. So the first Netflix was not a streaming company at all. It was a DVD by post company. Its original innovation was, guess what? Convenience. And some of us do remember this. No late fees, a larger catalogue, we're all nodding, a larger catalogue than the local video store, and discs delivered to your house. It competed with Blockbuster. Who remembers Blockbuster? By making the older rental model easier. Then in 2007, Netflix launched streaming. At first, it was a free add-on for DVD subscribers. It did not immediately replace the old business. It sat beside it. But Netflix understood earlier than most, I think, that the delivery system was changing. The internet was going to replace the postbox. Now, who remembers the Quickster episode in 2011? It's really useful because it does one thing. It shows us Netflix separating strategy from execution. Now, what was Quickster? So Netflix tried to split the DVD and streaming businesses into two brands. Customers, we all, I'm sure, hated it. I think we did anyway. So the city also hated it. So the stock market really punished Netflix. And guess what? Netflix reversed the decision. But the underlying strategic call was definitely right. DVDs were legacy. Streaming was the future. The execution failed, but the direction of travel held. So the next pivot, content. So early, Netflix streamed, as we all remember, other people's shows and films. That worked while studios treated Netflix as extra money. But once streaming became the future, those same suppliers became competitors. So Disney, Warner, NBCU, Paramount, all of them eventually wanted more control over their own libraries. So Netflix had to do one thing. What was that? It became a producer. House of Cards in 2013 was a symbolic moment. Netflix was no longer a distribution platform. It became a studio. That created the Netflix model of the late 2010s. Spend heavily on content, drive viewing up, reduce churn, add subscribers, and raise prices over time. In other words, Netflix became a retention business. Hours watched counted because they were a proxy for yours and mine own habit. The more people watched, the less likely they were going to cancel. So for investors, that model was really relatively easy to understand, even if it was, guess what, expensive to run. Content spend created engagement. Engagement reduced churn. Low churn supported pricing power. Pricing power justified more content spend. The whole machine was built around people inside the subscription ecosystem. Then came the 2022 shock. Netflix lost subscribers. The stock fell hard, and the company was forced to do two things it said for years it did not want to do. First, it launched an advertising tier. Second, it cracked down on password sharing. So both moves changed the model. Advertising gave Netflix a way to serve more price-sensitive users without simply discounting the whole product. Paid sharing turned some non-paying viewers into paying customers or just pushed them off the system altogether. The company returned to growth. But those changes also set up the next pivot. Netflix is no longer asking, how do we keep subscribers watching? It's asking, how much value can we generate from each visit to the app? Now that is the shift from retention to yield. Retention is about whether people stay subscribed. Yield is about how much value Netflix can generate from each unit of attention that they are there. So that frame, in my view, really does depict what is happening now. The redesigned mobile experience that we spoke about, I think early in January, is aimed at the opening moment. The moment when someone opens Netflix without knowing what they want. That is one of the hardest problems in streaming, and no one's cracked it. Netflix can now suggest that it might be down that right track or going in that right direction. The catalog can be enormous, the recommendation system can be good, and the user can still bounce because choosing something really does feel like hard work. Netflix's answer is vertical discovery. Short clips, autoplay, and a feed that lets viewers move from scene to scene before they can commit to the titles. That does not mean Netflix is becoming TikTok. The distinction is important. Netflix has added vertical discovery. It has not moved into vertical drama in the way some short-form platforms have. Vertical is where Netflix wants you to find something. Horizontal is still where it wants you to watch. Now, in the old model, a successful session was mainly a long viewing session, hours and hours. In the new model, success begins earlier. Did the app open? Did the user find something quickly? Did Netflix keep that attention inside its own environment? And if the user is on the ad tier, did that visit create monetizable advertising inventory? This is where the advertising business becomes central rather than incidental. Netflix expects around $3 billion in advertising revenue this year. The advertiser base is growing quickly. Programmatic buying is becoming a larger share of non-live inventory, and in markets where the ad-supported plan is available, a majority of new sign-ups are choosing it. At that point, advertising is not just a bolt-on. It starts to change what kind of company Netflix is. A pure subscription company wants viewing because viewing reduces churn. An advertising-supported company wants viewing, but it also wants frequency, targeting, inventory, and yield. It wants more reasons for people to open the app, more surfaces on which to sell attention, and more formats that can bring people back without requiring a 2-hour commitment. That explains the other products, live events. That explains video podcasts. That explains games. It explains the mobile redesign, and it helps explain why Netflix is investing in AI-enabled production tools. The interpositive acquisition. We're getting closer to today. Ben Affleck's generative AI filmmaking company was framed as a creator tooling. That is true. But inside this broader shift, it also looks like a supply-side investment. If Netflix is creating more surfaces, more formats, more entry points, and more reasons to open the app, it also needs cheaper, faster, and flexible content supply chain. This does not mean Netflix is abandoning premium telly or film. Quite the opposite. The point is that premium content becomes one part of a wider attention system. So the traditional Netflix question was always, what shows keep you subscribed? The new Netflix question is broader. What combination of shows, films, clips, live events, games, podcasts, recommendations, and ads creates the most value from each membership relationship? Now, this brings us very, very closely to today. So I'm nearly getting there. So the Q1 the first quarter results were kind of interesting. The reaction was very interesting, and we covered this on a previous episode. The headline numbers for Netflix were really strong. Revenue was up 16%. Operating margin was above guidance. Net income rose sharply, though that was slightly distorted by the payout determination fee that they got from the Warner Brothers Discovery situation. Underneath that, the core business was still growing. And yet, the stock market penalized it, and the stock fell under 10%, just under 10%, which is quite significant. But part of that was Q2 guidance, part of it was earning optics, part of it was Reed Hastings, the original founder, one of the original founders, announcing that he will not stand for re-election as the board chair in June. But the deeper issue here, in my view, is that the market is still deciding what company it is trying to price, because Netflix is reinventing itself. If Netflix is just a mature video business with an advertising tailwind, then the valuation at the moment for Netflix does definitely look demanding. Mature subscription businesses eventually slow down. There are only so many households, only so many price rises, only so many hours in a day. But if Netflix is becoming an attention yield business, which is where I think it's pivoted towards, the comparison set changes. Then the relevant questions are not subscriber growth and churn, their ad load, their ad pricing, their frequency of visits, live event acquisitions, gaming engagement, efficiency, and the cost of content supply. So I think that's a different business, and I think that's where we find Netflix at the moment. It's also why I think Hastings himself, the transition of him out of the business is more symbolically neat, but operationally less important than it looks. Hastings stepped down as co-CEO in 2023. The company has already been running under Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters. His departure from the chair role closes the original Netflix chapter, but it does not create the new strategy. The new strategy is already visible in the product, as I've just alluded to. That has usually been the case for Netflix. The product changes before the market fully catches up and agrees on the story. So the DVD company became a streaming company before the financial model was obvious. The streaming company became a studio before the industry accepted the scale of original content. The subscription company moved into advertising after insisting for years it would not, and now the streaming winner maybe trying to become something broader, a system for monetizing attention across multiple formats, surfaces, and price points. So the question is not whether Netflix won streaming, in my view. I'm going to put this question out to everyone. The question is whether streaming is still the right category for Netflix. If Netflix is a subscription business, the stock is definitely expensive. If Netflix is a yield business, the market may still be very early in understanding what it has become. So Reed Hastings, goodbye, will not stand for re-election in June. The chapter in which Netflix was unambiguously a subscription story is closing with him. So what comes next is still being priced. Claire.
Wow. That was incredible, and it's going to be hard to follow. And I completely agree with you that Netflix is hugely impressive as a market maker in the same way that Google or YouTube has been, in terms of constantly reinventing itself without waiting necessarily for the market to ask it to do it when it doesn't necessarily feel like it needs to, or there's no sort of strong signal that it needs to. It will still go out and try new things. I admire the way that they are quite happy to go, do you know what, we said we would never do this, but actually we've changed our mind now because it makes sense to do it now. I think all of this is true. I also think, I think the way you've described its history and where it is now is absolutely correct. I do believe that it is going to face quite significant challenges. And I think while everything that you've said is true, some of their recent moves are very focused on the key danger that they're seeing, which is the disappearance of their library content. And you have to remember, so you talked about the change of their business model. It used to be a subscription business. The thing about subscription business is, while you do want people to watch things on the platform because it's good to avoid churn, it doesn't really matter if they do. The revenues don't change because fewer people watch your content or a certain user watches fewer shows. Once you attack on advertising on top, then it becomes very dependent on how many people watch a certain show, because your advertising is directly proportional to how many people watch a show. So you do want volumes and volumes and volumes of hours being watched. If you look at the Netflix library today, it still is about 50% of library content. And the window for that library content is closing fast. There are still some shows there from other studios that have longer licensing deals that are still there, but we know Disney is moving all of their content out. If the Paramount WD merger happens, all of that content will also move out. The Fox content is out. The Sony content, they have a deal with Sony on movies, but most of the Sony TV content is co-productions and they won't have access to that. All of the library is gone. These are hours and hours and hours of content. We're talking about shows that had 24 episodes over 10 years, 24 episodes a year over 10 years that are going. If you look at Netflix's content strategy, it's quite interesting. They have really doubled down quietly over the last few years on returning series. So if you look at the things that are working on Netflix, it's Bridgerton, it's Lincoln Lawyer, which is really a traditional procedural, legal drama. And it's those returning series. Yes, they're still doing the prestige, Adolescence, the prestige miniseries, etc. But in terms of hours viewed, these are quite small. They're great to bring people in, as you were saying, but they are much less efficient at maintaining churn. Netflix is still best in class when it comes to churn compared to their competitors, but with all the library content leaving, that may well change. So what are they doing? They're leaning into other genres. They're leaning into sports. They're leaning into live event. They're leaning into podcasts, because they're leaning a lot into non-English language content, because this will make their library look stronger. But the truth is, they are facing a lot of their content, and the content that has made the platform, the content that's made Netflix the utility of the streaming world, the place where people start by going when they're looking for something to watch. That huge, early entrant advantage, that's going away, and they are working very hard. They're clearly aware of this, and they're working very hard to replace it. But it'll be an interesting story to watch. So that's my take on the Netflix content library.
Wow. Well, that was a tour de force. That was you were speaking with I thought the authority of a bishop's sermon, if I may say, Maureen. It was almost like a vocal essay. Marvelous, and took us through the story and also the economic realities, and also left us with a bit of a cliffhanger. We've spent a decent amount of time on that. It flew by, and we really should crack on if that's okay with you guys. And by cracking on, I mean, of course, move to in the news. And so, here we go, in the news. Yes. So, Claire, we start off with some perhaps not very good news. Meta and BBC announcing, I think, layoffs. You're there, halfway in between BBC Towers and Meta Mansions, with that story, Claire.
Yes, not good news whether you work in media or tech, really, this week. So let's start with the BBC, because I think the BBC is perhaps not that surprising, although the number is quite high, but the timing is interesting. So the BBC has announced that they plan to cut up to 2,000 jobs, which is 10% of its workforce. And they're doing this in order to try to save £500 million over the next 2 years. They are doing this because, they are declining and potentially endangered license and fee income. There's obviously inflation. We all know about production rising costs. The competition landscape is very different, etc. The interesting thing about this story is that the announcement arrived just after Tim Davies left the BBC. So Tim Davies was the outgoing Director General of the BBC. He left on April 2. The new Director General, Matt Britton, is starting on May 18th. This came last week, so just about halfway in, and it was the poor interim DG, Brodie Talbot-Davies, who had to announce this to the world. So I think it was quite smart to do it in that way. I'm sure Tim Davies didn't want this to be his legacy. I'm sure Matt Britton didn't want this to be the first thing that was announced, but it will still happen. It's also a way to put some pressure, I suspect, on the government as they are thinking about license fee renewal, charter renewal, etc. But frankly, I don't think there's a huge conspiracy there. I think they need to do it, and they knew they had to do it, and they've been planning it for a while, and they had this window of opportunity to announce it, and they've just gone for it. Meta is also laying off 10% of its workforce, which is 8,000 jobs, and they're starting that in May, and they're also freezing 6,000 hires. So it's not also a great time to be working in that area of the world. Why? Because they're pivoting to AI. Where are they cutting this? And I'd never like stories about people getting fired, so I certainly have no schadenfreude there. But listen, the metaverse turned out not to be as big a deal as everybody thought it was going to be. Who would have thought? So metaverse, virtual reality, they're closing their Horizon Worlds, which was their big project on Quest VR. Just generally, the Quest VR project is certainly perhaps not closing down, but being put on hold. And they're redirecting all of those efforts into AI. It makes sense. That's what the market wants. The metaverse, there will be some element of virtual reality and virtual worlds in the future happening, but not in the way that Mark Zuckerberg, went crazy about a few years ago. AI is much more concrete. There's much more obvious direct business implications for Meta. So it makes sense, but it's still going to be a painful moment for the industry. What did you think, Maureen?
Yeah, I think it's kind of inevitable on the Meta side, but on the BBC side, it's really interesting to look at the timing of these layoffs. So I think it does clear the way for Matt Britton then to focus on what he's going to need to work on very, very carefully and closely with government. Is on the universal service or the license fees, and on the fact that there's so many people who are not watching the BBC, not watching iPlayer, and are moving across watching other channels. So I think he's got a lot to do, and I guess this was not. He didn't want this to be the first on his list to have to release a significant number of people from the BBC. So yeah, interesting timing. Yeah, good one.
I think the cynicism of the metaverse was actually on the Media Beat. I think I'm sure we weren't all in on the Media Beat.
I was never a big believer in the metaverse. Yeah. This is one where I can say I called it.
Yeah,
but maybe I could have been wrong, but I really did not believe in it in the way that it was described.
Correct. Congrats.
I think we were aligned. So
Yeah.
We were short or
we were
long or
aligned.
something.
Yeah.
Cold, not
Cold.
hot. We were cold on the
Yeah.
metaverse,
Cold.
and it has
We
turned out
probably
to be as
were
cold
short.
as
We probably were short on it.
we were short. Sorry,
We
yes,
did
that's
short
right.
and long.
We were short on the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it's
Yeah.
cold as the actual universe in the far ends of it. That's great. Thank you. We have a story from Maureen now. So Maureen very kindly told me how to pronounce this. It's spelled ridiculous. IQ. No, I can't even put the letters together. But it's Iqiyi, I think.
Iqiyi. Yeah, which is
because we know how I struggle with foreign languages. But yeah, the Netflix of China, Maureen. So
Indeed.
yes, Maureen is there. Over to you in Beijing.
Yeah, I'm in Beijing. Gosh, that was quick, wasn't it? Actually, exactly. So they are known as the Netflix of China, and they've entered the news in the last week or so because of a CEO has made a really interesting statement about how where it's taking its business, and in particular, it's been very aggressive on the AI contents. Basically saying, we're a major streaming platform, we know that, but actually we're going to do stuff rather than talk about it. So it's shipping a whole bunch of tools to its creator. I'm going to call it the Creatorverse. So not only it's sort of a streaming platform, which is a place where people watch, there's also a marketplace for creators to showcase their wares. So they have launched what's called Nado. This should be easy for you, Oliver, to pronounce. Nado Pro, which is Nado Pro, which is an AI native production suite for creators. Effectively, it's giving or allowing almost 70 AI agents covering script writing, directing, visual design, editing, and other sort of paths on the workflow. And creators can use this in at the same time as so you can use this suite of products, at the same time have access to Iqiyi's own intellectual property, its own library, and all of its shared digital assets, its virtual sets, its props, its AI rendered characters, distribution. So it really is going full hog AI platform. There's been a bit of a backlash, as you can imagine. Some of the actors who sit inside their database that is still negotiating the likeness rights, so they've got their own avatars there. They are negotiating quite heavily, or rather pushing back very heavily, to say, we need rights to this. We need negotiation. We need compensation for this. So while it's really interesting that they have really sort of gone full hog in creating an environment and a platform with all these tools, these agents for the immediate creator sphere, the IP that sits there, or the actors that are sitting there, Iqiyi's CEO has come out and said, look, you still will have to negotiate the use of those rights, of your IP and of your likeness, but we're just giving the platform to the community. So it's a little bit vague. It's a little bit not quite sure how one wants to play in it, but nonetheless, it's a really interesting move. And you can compare that to, say, what Netflix is doing, which is effectively saying through the acquisition of Interpositive that we are opening up for the content. Iqiyi is basically saying we are doing absolutely everything. And they expect also a feature-length film this summer, AI generated, to be a commercial success. So we'll have to watch this space. Interesting.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. The one thing I will say is add, because I was impressed by this, and I'm sure a friend of the show, Nina, will send me some stats on this. IG announced all this at their annual World Conference, which I didn't realize they had. So they are, that's a pretty impressive big event, and they launched all this. And yes, there's been a backlash by some actors, but others are embracing it. So it will be interesting. And I think the acceptance of AI generated content in China is very different and much higher than perhaps in the Western world at the moment. So of course it's very interesting to look at how it develops, but there will be a difference in the acceptance level naturally. So yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say wait and see then. But,
wait and see. This is a story that will run and run.
Thank you. Saving me a job.
Especially after summer as well. We'll see whether or not a commercially successful AI-generated feature film, because that's what they're promising, is launched and received. How will it be received? That will be interesting to see.
probably what they said about synthesizers in the late 70s. That was super. Thank you so much. Iqiyi. Yeah, I did it. It's quite easy, really. That's good. So finally, yes, Claire, this is one of yours. Oh, blimey. Here we go again. Paramount
Boring.
Well, make it interesting.
Okay. Oh, wow. Challenge there. Okay. All right. I'm going to make it quick mostly. We talked about this, so we wanted to give you an update on this. We talked about the WBD shareholder meeting, which was held on April 23rd at 10 a.m. Eastern, which was about voting on the Paramount Skydance merger. And we don't know exact stats, but the WBD said that the shareholders of record had voted almost unanimously for the merger. So that overwhelmingly was the word that they used. So that's very good news. The final results will be certified and we'll have more information. So that's a green light from the shareholders. Nobody really thought that it wouldn't be a green light. There's still some paperwork. That's all good. It doesn't make all the regulatory pressure go away. They also voted overwhelmingly against David Zaslav getting the golden parachute that we mentioned. But that vote is non-binding, so it really doesn't matter much. It matters in the sense that the board of the joint entity will have to decide whether they want to face the backlash, still give him his money, but know that there will be a shareholder backlash, or actually soften the terms a little bit. And it's possible that they went high knowing that they would have to climb down a little bit and make it look better. So we shall see how much money poor Mr. Zaslav walks away with. It's still going to be a lot, so I'm not that worried. That's it on that story. Unless, Maureen, do you have anything else?
No, it just says, you're absolutely right. So the record now says investors approved the merger, but they rejected the mythology of Zaslav's turnaround.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Absolutely. Which is probably fair enough.
Yeah.
And we're making a prediction here that he probably won't starve. I think.
I think he'll be fine.
He'll get the money.
He'll get some money. He might get a little bit less money.
A little bit less money. Well, you heard it here first. Thank you so much. What a great in the news that was. But that is it. That was in the news. Okay, here we go. Podmojis time. I was going to say fingers on the buzzers, but it's not like that because I invite people to contribute. So fingers off the buzzers, which don't exist. And we'll start with Maureen. And can you Podmojize the old P&G and microdramas thing? And actually possibly explain it.
Explain it first, shall I? Yeah. As I quickly try to think of what my Podmoji is. Yeah, exactly. So Procter & Gamble has got its own sort of personal care brand unit called Native Brand. And they've launched the Golden Pear Affair, a 55-episode vertical micro.
It is a great title.
It's a wonderful, wonderful one. And Pear with an EA, not an AI, as I've seen a lot of the trade magazines misspell it. Vertical, so they basically got this 55-episode vertical Microsoft drama. They're working with Dentsu Entertainment as well. So the series is built around this jewelry heist, a missing sister, a globe-spanning romance with all the global flavors, the Japanese golden pear or the Turkish rose water collection woven into the story. So it's absolutely fantastic, woven into the story. So the distribution model is the interesting part. The first episodes are free across all the social media platforms. And then when you really fall in love with it and when you really get hooked, you have to then go to the site and then you have to pay $9.99 with all the different individual episodes. That'd be really interesting if people actually do that. But the historical piece is what's really interesting here. So in the 1930s, we all know that Procter & Gamble helped shape the TV soap opera. I should have given this baton to Claire, actually, by producing serialized producing serialized and sponsoring entertainment around household brands like soap powder and whatnot. That was 90 years ago. And now, guess what? The brand is not sitting next to the story. The brand is inside the story yet again. So this is not competing with a TV pilot or anything like that. What it is competing with is the media plan, which is really interesting. So I love this because it really is showing another side of how people are using vertical drama or microdrama, or indeed the micro soaps. So I love this. And yes, and I'm getting my...
Is she getting What could it be?
Do you have soap? Oh no!
Oh, it's a lobster.
Would have been great if you had picked up a bar of soap.
I was going to pick up a bar of soap, but I didn't. This is great cereal thinking.
Okay.
For a
That's a lobster.
surreal moment. For a surreal moment.
Okay, 0 points for that. But it is a very nice lobster.
I think we've seen the lobster before. Yeah, soap operas are named.
Yes.
Yeah, soap operas are named for Procter & Gamble sponsorship. That's why they're called soap operas. Just a little bit, I think most people know this. I think it's an interesting PR operation. I think it will have been quite a small drop in the ocean of the P&G media buy of the year, but if it works, it might be better. The bit that I'm less sure about is asking people to pay for content. That's a very big departure from the original soap opera model, which was all about brand awareness and, sponsorship content. I'm not sure I wouldn't have done it that way. I'm surprised it went that way. Moving people to the site, yes. Asking them to pay for it, surprised. Whatever it does, it's a good story. The headlines have paid for themselves. I'm sure they'll be happy with the way it's landed. And let's wait and see whether they publish the results. If they don't, it probably means it hasn't happened. My Podmoji is, okay, I'm putting glasses on and looking slightly doubtful. I think that works quite well.
Okay, 0 points. No, very nice.
We're being very tough today.
It's very tough. The bar is very high.
Feedback. It is. We've had some feedback that I'm far too soft, so I'm
okay.
0. Okay, good. I want to challenge you, Claire. Now, I would only ever do this if I was absolutely certain, due to your towering intellect. However, I think you might have got it wrong about where soap comes from. I think soap comes from soapbox opera, which is about the people who used to stand in Hyde Park Corner on soapboxes saying things to the crowd. It was a tradition in...
I think I'm wrong, but I think sorry, I'm right and you're wrong. But you know what? Let's put it... We will get the audience to tell us. But yes, I'm pretty sure of myself on this one. It's a good... It's a good theory. We need to do a deep dive on soap operas because it's something that's very, very close to my heart. And Maureen, you may remember that I was in charge of soap operas for a while.
I do remember that. I do remember
and
that.
I love that topic.
All soap operas.
Yeah.
Soap operas.
Yeah.
Wow.
So not all soap operas. It's not all soaps in the world, but the ones that Fremantle produced at the time, which were actually quite a few. Anyways, let's move on.
Claire, I will mediate the between the two of you because I think
fair enough. But as soon as I said it, you did shake your head.
Yes, sorry about that. But I think you're in a different context, Oliver. You were right. But in the context of brand,
reality,
and this context, I'm afraid Claire is right. Just in this context, but you're absolutely right about Hyde Park and the soap boxes because soap did come in these big boxes.
And I thought soapbox opera came from it was like a cheap
idea of serial commercializing. On radio, and it was on radio. It was not.
It started on radio.
It started the deep dive. That was a shallow dive. Yeah. We did a very shallow dive.
It's a teaser. Let's call it a teaser.
That's a great way of doing. Okay, I accept that. I'm going to look it up myself, do my own independent research. However, that was a very compelling argument you made there, Maureen. Damn, proven wrong. Well, it's a good job I'm the person who edits this. Right. So next we have is it Bolloré takes over Grasset? Bolloré with an accent?
Actually, much better. You're getting there. You're very close. Bolloré takes over Grasset.
Bolloré take over Grasset.
Which I get is complicated because you have this A sound on both words, but they're spelled completely differently. So I understand this is what. But I mean, let's talk about OUGH and the number of different. Exactly. So before we start throwing stones. Let's look at your own glass windows. Anyways, Vincent Bolloré, French media owner and billionaire and very conservative, has been building a media empire. He owns 30% of Vivendi. Through Vivendi, he owns Canal+. He has acquired a very in France, a very famous newspaper called GDD, Journal du Dimanche, which is our only, the French only Sunday newspaper. And he bought it in 2023, fired the editor immediately and slashed the staff from 100 journalists to 4, and then turned it into essentially a mouthpiece. And he has just acquired, he owns Hachette, which is a big publishing house in France, and he has just acquired through Hachette Grasset, which is maybe Penguin would be a close experience. It's close comparison. It's a legendary publishing house in France. I'm trying to come up with the Picador. I don't know. That's where all the sort
Penguin's perfect. I think Penguin's perfect. Yeah.
That's where all the really, intellectual avant-garde authors would be published by Grasset is basically everybody's dream. Anyway, a few weeks after taking it over, he fires the CEO and publishes a big column in the GDD explaining that, this is what he's going to do with Grasset. 170 authors decided to walk out and refuse to be published by this guy. It sparked a real fear in France. People are quite scared of what he's doing. Through his C8 channel in France, he's built up this very right-wing guy, Eric Zemmour, who ended up becoming a presidential candidate. He's trying to become a kingmaker by taking ownership of the French media, of which in France, book publishing is still quite an important part. It might not be in other countries, but it's still a big thing in France. So it's a big deal. It's a huge scandal. It polarizes further French media, which was already getting quite polarized. It's not a great story. It makes me sad, really. That's my Podmoji. I'm sad.
Sad face without specs. Got it.
Yeah.
Good lip work. Maureen.
Potentially, there is some light at the end of this sad tunnel, I think, and it's probably about rights. And you can probably comment more on this, Claire. In France, I know a little bit about it, but in terms of publishing rights or authors' rights, at the moment, of course, if the authors leave, possibly Valérie will keep, or the publishing house will keep some of them. Will keep them. I mean, it will depend on writer to writer. But I think what the writers are trying to do, what the authors are trying to do, basically they've walked out. Absolutely, they want to lobby quite hard for what's called the conscience clause. Now, that happens in newspapers for journalists, where if you do not necessarily align with the political or the business stance of the owner of the company, you can grab hold of your rights and they walk with you when you walk out of the door. And my understanding is all these 170 authors are now going to lobby very, very hard for this clause to be inserted into publishers' contracts. And I think that's going to be pretty good, so that the buyer may only imprint, but writers will still be able to carry much of the value around the rights, and they can walk out. So our fingers crossed. My Podmoji is, this is a prickly story.
It's a prickly story. That's quite nice. That's nice.
Very
I
good.
like that. I would give that point
0.1. Good. Yes, that's very nice. It was a prickly story indeed. And here's another one. Oh, this is a great segue. So, Claire, you start off with this. And prickles on the set of White Lotus, question mark.
Well, there's tea there, which don't have it, but White Lotus season 4 has just started shooting in France, in Provence, where it will be set. But a few days into the 1 week into the shooting of the season 4, Helena Bonham Carter, which was one of the big names that they had signed for that season, has left. And nobody knows why or what happened. There was a statement that said it was all very amicable, obviously. But that's at that time in production, that's a little bit of it. I mean, it's a huge amount of lift for the production. They are going to need to rewrite, to recast, probably to reshoot some things. They're going to have to talk to their insurers because there's going to be some production insurance clauses to be looked at. They will have to get all the writers back in the room because that's probably going to impact a lot of the script. They're going to have to redo their entire schedule because while they're casting that role, they're going to have to do to still continue shooting. Every location booking may have to be reviewed. It's a huge lift. I'm sure they're working overnight to sort this out, but it's quite rare to be in that advance in production that you've started shooting and then recast. I can think of one example, and that was Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, where Peter Jackson decided to recast basically again a week into production, although it might have been still in pre-production by then. But it is quite rare, so I don't know what happened. Nobody knows what happened. It's possible that it was genuinely, once they were on set, it was decided it didn't work, but we all want to know. So I guess my Podmoji is tea.
Tea, yeah, of course. Yeah, very nice. It's 0.75 point. I wonder if when she got there and discovered it wasn't directed by Tim Burton, she thought, what's oh, right, I didn't expect that. Maureen.
I like that, Tim Burton. Okay, mine is sunglasses.
Oh, Provence.
Sun lounger, Provence, and a glass of rosé. There's nothing more to add.
You just want to be cast. You're just waiting for the phone call.
Oh, you are a bit White Lotus.
Yes,
actually.
exactly.
You can see Maureen at White Lotus. Yeah.
You're waiting for the phone call. Yes, you'd be amazing. That would be the thing to do. Let's put that idea in there.
Yeah. Let's put that
hidden
idea in
secret.
there. Yeah,
That's right. It's a hidden secret of the.
I prefer to be behind the camera. Yes.
That's very good. Well, that was a brilliant end to Podmojis. Maureen's made a massive effort on the Podmojis this time. Lots of props. So it's a draw this week. So 1.15.
So cool. It's an honour to draw with you, Maureen.
Oh,
well, given that
likewise.
Yeah, and of course the deep dive was a lecture almost. It was just
Was it a lecture? Sorry.
A good lecture.
Lecture's a good thing.
Structure.
Oh yes, no, lecture's definitely a good thing. Structure, eloquence, surprise, bit of emotion, and everything that makes a deep dive memorable.
A soap opera, really.
A soap opera. Yeah,
really
I just looked that up.
Yeah.
And in fury, I realised
I'm on my
that
soapbox.
you're right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a song by Supertramp called A Soapbox Opera, and that was what was hitting in my brain. Anyway, that's it for this time. Wonderful deep dive. Thank you, Maureen and Claire, of course. But it only remains for me to say goodbye and thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Oliver. Goodbye, Claire.
And likewise, goodbye and thank you, Claire.
Goodbye and thank you, Oliver and Maureen.
That was wonderful. Looking forward to the next one already. But for now, bye-bye.